there, and welcome back to the amazing collection unboxing. We are on box number 78, and this week I chose a box labeled Breyer Wildlife. 3 moose, 2 pronghorn, and 2 elk. So let's see which ones we have. Well, first up we have the Breyer Pronghorn. This is the original issue of this mold. He was sculpted by Chris Hess, probably sculpted in 70, 71, 72 era, and he was made for a very long time, so he was probably made up through the mid 80s to the early 90s in this very realistic pronghorn kind of chestnut with light points. You will find variations because he was made for so long. He was very popular and made, like I said, for a long period of time. Collectors really like him. He's very realistic. He just wasn't issued a lot because there's not a lot of color choices that you have if you want to stay realistic. Or you could go decorator, I suppose. I don't remember. Maybe they've done a decorator or two. That would be really cool. But anyway, so that's the Breyer original pronghorn. Oh, and we have another pronghorn. So now this guy is quite obviously a different issue of this mold. So like I said, there's variations where they're dark and they're light. This guy is quite clearly different. He is much redder. He has no dark on his tail. He has a lot more detailing in his face and his ears. So if he was made up through the late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s, this guy probably took over for a couple of years. They were kind of shaking up their line right about then, so he was probably made for 3, 4, 5 years. And I can actually accurately date this one because he is one of the bi-eyes where they said in the year 1997, all models would have bi-eyes. Originally it was just limited to like commemorative editions and special runs because it does take an extra person, extra time to sit and paint that little extra detail in the eye. 1997 they said was the year of the bi-eyes and every model was going to get them, and this model has those bi-eyes. So he was issued in 1997 and it was really quickly discontinued. Like 6 months or so they said they couldn't maintain the quality, the cost was a little bit much, and they just couldn't make it consistently because it was just a person with a paintbrush painting those eyes on every time. So this guy was issued from somewhere in early January of 1997 up through mid-year 1997. So a very small window of time. Made variation collectors crazy because now they had to have a bi-eye and a non-bi-eye of whatever their preferred mold or model was. But he is definitely a different run than the original. Next we have, trying to grab these guys because they have those big racks. This is the elk. This is the elk model. These guys are very prone to breakage because of these big antler racks that they have. And so it's not the easiest thing in the world to find them completely intact. But this guy he is in good condition. He is a later issue. So the original elk was issued late 60s. I think he came out before the pronghorn, so somewhere in the late 60s. This particular guy, and again, he was made for a long period of time. We'll probably find one in here. I forget, but let's grab another one. So this is another elk. This guy looks more like a regular run because he's got kind of just that browny color. Yeah, I think that's a regular run. Oh, so this guy is a bi-eye. Now he looks like the original issue brown, so he could have still been made and not changed runs like that pronghorn did. I think this is the regular elk, but actually made in 1997 because he has the bi-eye. But you can again see the difference. This guy is similar. He's still brown. He's still darker around his mantle and neck, but he has a much grayer undertone. And his antlers, now this is interesting and something I haven't noticed before, his antlers aren't tipped with black like the original elk was. again, just think about it as they're making these guys, because they're all made by hand. They're all hand airbrushed, and this was the era of Made in the USA. Somebody actually had to airbrush each one of the tips of this guy. So that took a lot of time and a lot of effort and trying to make it consistent. It's one of those things that probably when they switched, they stopped doing just because it was labor intensive and expensive. And really, who's going to notice if you're just buying this for display in your cabin, or if you just like elk and you have that decor going on? So this is a later issue elk after 97. This is the original issue elk, but with the by eyes, and I can't remember. So it was 2 pronghorn and 2 elk. So these are going to be our only 2 elk of this time. And these antlers are molded separately and applied by hand. So you can find variations, but I haven't heard of a lot of them. Like the cow you could find with horns pointed up or down or sideways or both different directions. I haven't heard of too many variations with the elk and his rack. So now we've got the moose. These guys are big and they take up a lot of shelf space. I actually outsourced all of my large animals to my parents' house because Dad has his office in the back of the house. And he has one of those display cabinets where he can have them up on the top, because these guys eat up a lot of space. They're wide with these antlers and they're very long. So this is the original issue moose. I can't remember which one was issued first, but he was also late 60s, sculpted by Chris Hess. I can't remember which one. It was like the moose, then the elk, and then the pronghorn was early 70s. This looks like the original issue. He just has regular eyes, and he has a big divot taken out of his antlers, and it's actually taped to his belly, so probably the collector accidentally broke it when they were handling him. I have been subject to that myself, so I know it happens. And so the collector saved it and put it back on, because you actually, glue doesn't work effectively on these plastics. The best way to repair them is through something that will melt the plastic, so you can actually have those 2 pieces of plastics put together more sturdily. So I don't tend to repair my own Breyers. I'll do something like this where I tape it on, and if I ever sell them on, I'll let somebody else repair them. So we've got another moose. Nice job of packing them though, with this little separate bubble wrap protecting their antlers. So this guy is much lighter, which, as we know, with long runs could be the same run, but I'm going to say this guy is actually different because he is significantly different tonally than the dark guy. I've seen the dark guy light, but I've never seen him this light. He is substantially similar. He even has the dorsal stripe that this guy has. He has the tipping on the outside of his antlers that this guy does, but I'm pretty sure that this guy is a completely separate issue. And he is a bi-eye, so he is a 1997 run of the moose. And we've got one more moose to go. I'm terrible. I can't think of any moose jokes, so if you have any wonderful moose jokes, leave them for me in the comments, and I can go, darn, that was a good one. I should have used that. This guy is very dark. So I'm going to say these 2 are probably the same run. Again, I'm not totally familiar with these to know. Interesting. So he is much darker than this guy, so you can see kind of from dark to light. Now this guy has a super dark rack of antlers in the front, so I'm not going to be confident that these guys are the same run. He does have the black tipping on the outside of his antlers. He is tonally similar. This guy has a dorsal stripe, this one does not. And all 3 of them look like they have pretty similar details on the outside of their antlers. I don't know why. This guy just seems different. He's very dark, And he actually has pinking in his nose that this guy doesn't have. So this guy could be a super early example. Like this guy could be from the 60s and this guy could be from the 70s or 80s. And like we said, this guy is 1997. And there's probably moose collectors that have all of the details of their mold changes as things go through time. The molds get worn out and they get retooled. So there's probably a few other changes, but this guy I'm going to say is probably just an early version of the regular run of the moose. Whew. That was interesting. Not a lot of horse information, but definitely some variety of animals and wildlife. Hope you enjoyed, and join me next week and we'll see what I happen to pull out of the boxes. Thank you.